I never expected to hear from my family again, not after that Thanksgiving when everything fell apart. It had been almost a year, but sometimes the memories still stung as if they'd happened yesterday. Pennsylvania was always beautiful in late October, but that morning the golden leaves swirling outside my apartment window only reminded me of all I'd lost. The air felt colder than it should, seeping into my bones, making me ache for something I could not name. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I set my mug of tea down, more out of surprise than urgency. No one texted me this early anymore, certainly not from a number I didn't recognize. The screen lit up. Miss Ava Morgan, your presence is required at the reading of Evelyn Morgan's last will and testament. 2 p.m. today. Peton and Associates. This is a legal notice. I read it once, then twice, certain it was a mistake or maybe a cruel joke. The last words my Aunt Linda said to me still echoed in my mind. You're not welcome here anymore, Ava. You've made your bed, don't expect sympathy from this family again. I'd believed her. For almost 12 months, I'd made do with solitude. It's funny, the habits you pick up when you think you have no one, how you learn to cook for one, to fill the empty rooms with radio static, to keep family photos face down in drawers because it hurts too much to see their smiles. Still, as I reread the message, my thoughts turned to Grandma Evelyn. She'd been the one person who never gave up on me, the one who saw past family drama and let me help in the garden or sit quietly with her while she told stories from her girlhood. Even during that last Thanksgiving, when I finally spoke up about the things I'd seen and couldn't ignore, she'd looked at me with something close to pride, not shame. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the anxious drum of my heart. Did she ask for me? Was this her doing, one last wish? Or was it Linda and Charles, luring me back only to watch me squirm? My mind replayed that holiday, the argument at the dinner table, my uncle's face going red, my aunt's voice like ice, the way Emma and Bradley stared at their plates and said nothing. I'd spoken the truth, and the cost was exile. I set the phone down, pacing the length of my small living room, trying to reason my way out of the rising panic. There was no rule that said I had to go. Nobody would care if I ignored the summons, if I let my family split up whatever was left of Grandma's estate without me. But something stubborn, something Evelyn had always encouraged in me, refused to let go. If you turn away from the truth, she once told me, the pain will find you anyway. Better to face it on your own terms. My apartment was quiet, the only sound the ticking of a cheap wall clock. I glanced at the photos on my bookshelf, most of them were landscapes, except for one small silver frame. I hesitated, then picked it up. Grandma and I, side by side, her arm hooked around my shoulders, both of us wearing winter hats and ridiculous grins. She loved silly hats. I wiped a spot of dust off the glass, then put it in my bag. I forced myself into motion. If I was going to do this, I'd do it on my terms. I showered and dressed, choosing navy slacks and a soft gray sweater, clothes that made me feel safe, nothing flashy. I braided my hair back the way Grandma always liked, neat and out of my face. Packing my purse, I added tissues, just in case, a pen, a battered notebook, and the old keychain Evelyn had given me years ago. Just a reminder, she'd said with a wink, that you always have a place here. The drive across town was mercifully short. My car was ancient, but the heater still worked and the local radio station played the oldies that reminded me of simpler times. Every turn brought back memories, passing the bakery where Grandma used to buy cinnamon rolls, the park where we'd watch ducks in the summer, even the corner drugstore where she'd pick up her prescription and flirt harmlessly with the pharmacist. Funny how grief doesn't let you forget, it just folds the past into everything you see. I turned down Maple Avenue and caught my breath. The old Morgan house looked much the same as ever, white clapboard siding, shutters that could use a fresh coat of paint, the massive oak tree in front still clinging to the last of its yellow leaves. Even from the street, I could see the dent in the mailbox from one winter when Bradley backed into it. He'd blamed the ice, but Grandma never quite believed him. The yard was neat but bare, the garden beds empty now, their glory days faded with summer. What had changed were the cars. 3 of them in the driveway, all new models, all unfamiliar. I recognized Linda's shiny SUV by its vanity plate, but the others were a mystery, likely Charles, maybe Jessica, or Emma. My heart pounded as I slowed to a stop. It struck me how much could change in a single year, who parked where, who was welcomed inside, and who was left out in the cold. I hesitated, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Should I just turn around, pretend I never got the message? Would that be easier than walking back into a room full of people who'd made it clear I didn't belong? I closed my eyes, letting the cool October air wash over me as I cracked the window. "You can do this," I whispered, not sure if I believed it. "You owe it to her, if nothing else." Sometimes, I thought, courage is just showing up. Grandma would have said, a good heart never goes out of style. Even if it makes life harder, you don't have to be ashamed. I tried to carry that with me as I put the car in park and gathered my things. One step at a time. As I walked up the familiar path, my gaze drifted over the worn porch swing, the fading welcome mat, the little ceramic squirrel that Evelyn insisted brought luck. I caught my reflection in the front window, older, more tired than I remembered. I squared my shoulders. Standing on that porch, I felt the weight of years, of old birthdays and Christmas mornings, the echo of laughter and the ghost of every argument. The world had changed, and so had I. Still, as I reached for the doorbell, I told myself, this is the last time I'll let them hurt me. After today, I decide who gets to be family. Somehow, that thought steadied me. The front door creaked open, and I stepped into the house that once felt like home. The voices inside were sharp, muffled by the heavy walls. My pulse raced as I hung back, just for a second, letting the sights and smells of the entryway flood my senses: polish, old carpet, a hint of cinnamon. I heard Mr. Peton's voice, calm, practiced, echo down the hall, and in that instant, I knew there was no turning back. Heart thudding, I walked in, glancing once more at the family photos on the wall, faces frozen in happier times, unaware of what was coming. Sometimes, I thought, you have to walk through the storm to get to the other side. As I passed the staircase, my hand brushed the banister, the wood worn smooth from decades of use. I paused at the living room doorway. On the coffee table, a glass bowl held faded peppermints, and next to it, a photo of Grandma in her Sunday best. I took a breath, drawing strength from every memory, every lesson Evelyn had given me. Then I moved toward the voices, ready, at least as ready as I'd ever be. The law office looked more like a haunted house than a place where justice might live. Its once bright Victorian trim had faded under Pennsylvania's long seasons, and the heavy clouds above seemed to press down on the old place, giving it a gray, watchful quality. I parked across the street, taking a moment to gather myself, then crossed through a swirl of autumn leaves to the gate. Each step made the building loom larger. The windows, tall and narrow, reflected my own uncertain expression as I reached for the brass knocker. Inside, the reception area felt dimmer than I remembered, or maybe that was just nerves. The secretary at the front desk, a kindly woman with silver hair and glasses on a beaded chain, looked up. "You must be Miss Morgan," she said, her voice polite but a little surprised. "They're already inside. Can I offer you some tea?" I hesitated, glancing at my watch. I was late, but not by much. "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding thinner than I liked. I wrapped my hands around the cup she offered, grateful for the warmth as I waited for whatever came next. The secretary motioned me down a hallway lined with old photographs, lawyers in somber black, couples signing deeds, families in sepia tones, each smiling as if nothing bad could ever happen behind those closed doors. For a moment, I envied their certainty. At the door to the conference room, I paused, listening to the voices inside. I recognized them all, my Uncle Charles's sharp bark, Linda's syrupy lilt, Emma's pointed laughter, Bradley's grumble, Jessica's quick, clipped retorts. They were in the middle of an argument, though I couldn't quite catch the details. For a moment, I considered slipping away. Instead, I took a breath and entered. Everyone looked up. Conversation died as if someone had cut a string. They sat at a long polished table, Charles at the head, flanked by Linda and Emma, Bradley slouched near the window, Jessica tapping her phone. The air was thick with expensive perfume, aftershave, and something colder, resentment. Charles's eyes narrowed, his mouth twisting. Well, look who finally decided to show. Linda smiled thinly, folding her hands on a manila folder. Ava, dear, you found your way after all. Emma offered a quick, mocking wave without looking up from her phone. Bradley just shrugged, barely meeting my gaze. Jessica didn't even pretend to be interested, her thumbs flying over the screen. I moved toward the farthest empty chair, pulling it out quietly. The secretary set my tea down beside me, then retreated, leaving a hush behind. Mr. Peton entered next, carrying a stack of documents and radiating the calm of someone used to storms. Thank you all for coming, he said, his eyes resting on me for a heartbeat longer than the others. Let's get started. Before we do, Charles interrupted, I'd like to know why she's here. He didn't bother to look at me. Mother made it very clear. I'm here because I was summoned, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I unfolded the text message and laid it on the table. Linda clucked her tongue. We all got the same notice. I assumed it was a mistake. Mr. Peton shook his head, steepling his fingers. It's not a mistake, Mrs. Morgan. Miss Morgan is required by law to be present as a direct beneficiary and descendant. Jessica rolled her eyes, sighing so dramatically it was almost theatrical. This is going to take forever. The room settled into uneasy silence. Papers rustled, chairs squeaked. Charles glared at me as if daring me to speak. I stared back, then focused on my tea, willing my hands not to tremble. Linda leaned toward Charles, whispering too loudly, we could have handled this as a family. Now there's an audience. Emma finally looked up. So, are we just going to sit here and pretend last Thanksgiving didn't happen? Or that Ava didn't do everything possible to embarrass us? I didn't answer. The room, filled with old portraits and the scent of lemon polish, seemed to close in. I wondered if any of them had ever seen themselves through my eyes, how small their kingdom really was. Bradley tapped his fingers against the table, eyes darting between Charles and Emma. Let's just get this over with. Mr. Peton nodded. We will, Mr. Carter. But first, a reminder, my office is a neutral space. I expect civility. He looked around the table, pausing at each face. Charles grunted, crossing his arms. He sat like a king deposed, holding court from a battered throne. Linda kept her folder clutched tight, as if afraid I'd snatch it away. Emma picked at a loose thread on her sweater. Jessica checked her reflection in her phone. The only one who seemed truly present was Mr. Peton. I tried to make myself smaller, wishing I could disappear into the upholstery. My chair felt unsteady, the fabric scratchy through my sweater. Every so often, one of them would glance my way, quick and sharp, like I was a stain they couldn't scrub out. The bickering resumed, quiet at first, then rising like a storm. Charles muttered about property lines and tax burdens. Linda fussed over jewelry and heirlooms. Emma brought up the value of the summer cottage, Bradley the stocks. Jessica complained that everything is always so complicated when Ava's involved. I sipped my tea, staring out the window at the swirling leaves. For a moment, I remembered happier times, summer picnics, birthday cakes, Grandma Evelyn's laughter ringing through the house. But those memories felt far away now, replaced by the sharp angles of resentment and suspicion. Suddenly, Charles slammed his palm on the table. "This is pointless. She doesn't belong here." Linda nodded. "It's disrespectful to Mother's wishes. We should have settled all of this ourselves." Mr. Peton cleared his throat. "With respect, the law requires all direct descendants to be notified and present. There are procedures." Charles cut him off. "Procedures. Always so many rules. The family comes first." I met his gaze, holding it steady. "Not when the family stops acting like one." The words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. For a second, nobody moved. Mr. Peton looked at me with a touch of sympathy, then at Charles. "Miss Morgan stays. Shall we proceed?" Charles slumped back in his chair, defeated for now. Emma rolled her eyes again. Bradley muttered something under his breath. Linda pursed her lips, her grip on the folder so tight her knuckles whitened. Jessica started texting, likely broadcasting updates to someone outside. I found myself wondering, not for the first time, why I'd come. I traced the rim of my cup, focusing on the steam rising in the chill air. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to vanish back into the quiet life I'd made for myself, where no one could touch me. But I stayed, out of duty to Evelyn and a stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth saving. There's a peculiar kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by family who would rather you weren't there. You learn to read the room, who controls the conversation, who hides behind sarcasm, who uses silence as a weapon. I realized then that power wasn't always in the loudest voice, sometimes it was in simply not backing down. The session hadn't even begun, but already I felt drained, as if each glare and whisper stole a little more of my strength. I forced myself to sit up straighter, reminding myself that I belonged here, if only because Evelyn wanted it so. As the room quieted and Mr. Peton shuffled the papers, I couldn't help but wonder if coming had been a mistake. Their resentment was no longer masked by politeness, it pressed in on me from every side. The walls of the Victorian house seemed to close in, haunted not by ghosts, but by the living. Sometimes, you walk into a room and realize you've left a part of yourself behind at the door. As I waited for the reading to begin, I wasn't sure I'd ever get that peace back. Every time I heard my last name in that room, it felt like a challenge, not a bond. It echoed off the conference room walls, clipped and sharp, as if the Morgans themselves had become strangers I was only distantly related to by bad luck. The table felt longer than ever, a no man's land of half-spoken words and shared history twisted into something bitter. Light seeped in weakly through the thick curtains, cutting the air into tired rectangles. The eyes of old Morgan ancestors watched us from every angle, their sepia faces stern and disappointed, as if they could see how things had turned out for their descendants. Their portraits loomed above the living, silent judges to every conversation. Small talk sputtered around the table like a car that refused to start. Emma flipped her hair, giving me a sideways glance. "Remember the Christmas we all went sledding and Dad's car got stuck," she said brightly, aiming her words somewhere between me and the past. Linda, not missing a beat, added, "Or Thanksgiving when Ava was late because she'd forgotten to pick up the pie. Grandma was so disappointed." Her tone oozed sweetness, but her eyes dared me to contradict her version. I managed a tight smile, fiddling with the edge of my napkin. I remembered both days differently. The Christmas Emma spoke of, I was the one who dug the car out while everyone else complained about the cold. And the Thanksgiving pie? Linda never asked me to bring it. But there was no point arguing, my memories held little currency here. Bradley cleared his throat, muttering about how holidays just haven't been the same lately. Jessica shrugged, not looking up from her phone. People move on. Families change. It was all a setup, I realized, an elaborate dance to paint me as the one who broke the rhythm. I could almost hear the gears turning, remind Ava of her mistakes, remind everyone else of how well things worked before she started causing trouble. I stared at my reflection in the polished tabletop, letting my mind drift to that night last year, the incident that changed everything. It was Thanksgiving, a feast laid out with Evelyn's best china and the usual tension simmering just beneath the gravy boat. Charles had been unusually loud about a new business opportunity. I'd watched him press a card into Grandma's hand, promising big returns, easy money. I saw the worry in her eyes as she tried to decline politely. Later, when the table was cleared and most of the family had migrated to the living room, I pulled Charles aside. "You can't keep doing this," I whispered. "It isn't right. Not with Grandma. Not with the neighbors. You know what happens when people lose their savings." He laughed, cold and dismissive. "You think you know better than the rest of us? Why don't you mind your own business for once?" I insisted, my voice trembling. "I'm trying to keep us out of trouble." "You're putting everything at risk." His eyes narrowed. "You're just jealous because you'll never be part of the real family business." The next day, Linda cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low and dangerous. "It's not your place to question how we handle things. You may be Grandma's favorite, but that doesn't give you the right to accuse us of anything." "I'm not accusing, I'm asking for honesty." "What about the church fundraiser money?" "The numbers don't add up, Linda. People are starting to notice." She stepped closer. "You've always had a problem with loyalty, Ava. Family comes first, even when you don't agree with everything." "Maybe I think loyalty means telling the truth," I shot back. Her face hardened. "No, loyalty means protecting your own." It hadn't taken long for the story to spread. Ava's causing trouble, Ava's making accusations, Ava's trying to tear the family apart. I watched the narrative twist, saw the glances grow colder, the invitations dry up. By Christmas, I was an afterthought. By New Year's, I was a cautionary tale. Now, back at the table, the present pressed in on me. Emma flashed a forced smile. "I guess some people just can't move on from the past." Charles bristled. "We're here to honor Mother, not relive old grudges." Linda chimed in, "Some of us know how to put the family first, even now." The gaslighting was so casual I almost laughed. Maybe, I thought, irony is all you have left when you're outnumbered. "Is that what this is?" I said softly. "Family first?" Jessica looked up, her eyes glittering. "If you don't want to be here, Ava, no one's stopping you." I met her gaze. "That's not true. You all made it clear exactly what you thought of me. But I'm not the one who broke this family." I felt the words slip out, raw and unvarnished, and I didn't regret them. For a moment, silence. Even the ancestors seemed to lean in closer. Charles's jaw tightened. "Maybe if you hadn't made such a scene, none of this would have happened." Linda clucked her tongue again, patronizing. "You're always so dramatic. Some things are better left alone." "Maybe I'm not the problem," I said, louder this time, the words filling the room. The temperature seemed to drop a degree. No one spoke. For the first time, I saw something flicker in Emma's eyes, doubt, maybe, or fear? Jessica looked away. Bradley slouched even lower. Mr. Peton cleared his throat, breaking the silence. He glanced at me, then addressed the table. Before we proceed, I should mention, Mrs. Evelyn Morgan left special instructions for today's proceedings. A ripple of uncertainty passed through the room. Even Charles stilled, his fingers drumming a nervous tattoo on the table. I felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. Evelyn never did anything without a reason. Whatever was coming next, it was out of my hands now. Sometimes, I thought, the past isn't as buried as we pretend. It waits, patient as old dust, ready to rise again with the smallest breath. When Mr. Peton opened the thick, cream-colored envelope, the room froze. The shuffle of papers, the tap of anxious fingers, even the faint humming of the old air vent, all of it went still, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I sat perfectly still, every muscle tense, caught between wanting this moment to be over and dreading what it would reveal. I remembered something Grandma Evelyn used to say, the lesson she tucked into so many of our late-night talks. Not everyone who calls you family deserves your trust, sweetheart. You can love people and still need to protect yourself. I wondered if she'd known, all along, just how hard I would need to learn that lesson. Mr. Peton adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat with more gravity than I'd ever heard from him before. I have here the last will and testament of Evelyn Morgan, he began. His voice, calm and measured, cut through the static of my nerves. But before I proceed with the reading, Mrs. Morgan left a video message, to be played for all present. The reaction was immediate. Linda's eyes widened in offense. A video? Since when do we do videos? Charles leaned forward, suspicion sharpening his features. Why wasn't this mentioned earlier? Is this even legally binding? Mr. Peton only nodded, unbothered by their protests. Mrs. Morgan was clear. She wished to address her family directly, her words, her wishes. The video was recorded in my presence, witnessed and documented. Emma rolled her eyes, folding her arms across her chest. Jessica, who had barely looked up all morning, snapped her phone shut for once, her attention fixed on the old laptop Mr. Peton set on the table. As he pressed play, the screen flickered, and there she was, Evelyn Morgan, my grandmother. Her hair was pulled back in her usual neat bun, eyes bright but tired. She wore her favorite cardigan, the one with the faded blue flowers, and behind her, sunlight filtered through lace curtains. "Hello, my dear ones," Evelyn's voice rang out, a little softer than I remembered, but steady. "If you're watching this, it means I'm no longer there to argue with you. I hope you're all being civil, though I suspect that's a tall order." A nervous chuckle moved through the room. I could hear Emma stifle a laugh, but the rest of the family bristled. I wanted you all to hear my wishes, not just as legal instructions, but from my heart. She looked directly at the camera, eyes sharp. "First, let's address the elephant in the room, why I made certain decisions, and why some of you may not like them." She paused, letting that hang in the air. She turned her gaze to Charles, then Linda. "Charles, I know about the opportunities you've offered to friends and neighbors. It's not right to take advantage of people who trust you. Linda, the church funds matter, it wasn't a harmless mix-up. I wish you'd come to me instead of hiding it. Emma, Jessica, Bradley, I love you all, but you must understand, the choices you make leave marks on other people, not just on yourselves." She took a steadying breath, her face softening as she continued. "If you're angry with Ava, I ask you to look in the mirror. She was the only one who told me the truth, even when it hurt. She visited me not because of what I could give her, but because she loved me. She stood up for what's right, even when it cost her dearly." I felt tears prick my eyes. Evelyn's faith in me was more than I'd let myself believe. Linda snorted, crossing her arms. She's just being dramatic. Mom was always a soft touch. Mr. Peton paused the video, his face stern. Mrs. Morgan's mental state was evaluated before recording this. She was fully competent, and all of this is on record. Charles's voice trembled with frustration. You expect us to just accept this? After everything? Evelyn's image reappeared on screen. I know this is difficult, but I won't let silence or denial shape this family's legacy. I want to believe you're better than your mistakes. But you can't rewrite the past just because you're uncomfortable with it. I have always tried to forgive, but I won't turn a blind eye anymore. She looked directly at the camera, and for a moment, it felt as though she was looking straight through the screen at each of us. The will reflects my wishes. If you contest it, you should know, every decision I made is backed up, every reason is clear. I did this out of love, even if it doesn't feel like it today. The video ended, leaving the room in silence so complete it bordered on eerie. I glanced around, Linda's mouth pressed in a hard line, Charles's fists clenched, Emma biting her lip, Bradley staring at his hands, Jessica's brow furrowed in confusion and fear. Something had shifted. For the first time, their certainty wavered, replaced by something like desperation, or maybe shame. I sat perfectly still, numb but strangely peaceful. It wasn't the distribution of money or property that moved me, but Evelyn's determination to tell the truth, to say out loud what everyone else refused to name. Mr. Peton closed the laptop with deliberate care. He picked up the envelope again, glancing around the table, his face unreadable. Now, if there are no further interruptions, I will read the terms of the will as instructed. I caught my own reflection in the black screen of the laptop, eyes wide, cheeks flushed. For years, I'd been the problem, the troublemaker, the one they'd cast out. Now, for the first time, I wondered if the ground had shifted beneath all of us. You could hear a pin drop, or a fortune shatter. That's how it felt as Mr. Peton unfolded the will, the quiet so sharp I was suddenly aware of every heartbeat in my chest, every soft squeak of a chair or shift of feet under the polished table. For a long, suspended moment, none of us spoke. We were caught in the vacuum left by Evelyn's words, her image still haunting the air. The echo of her warning from the video ran through my mind, if you fight this, you'll answer for everything. I felt the full weight of it settle over the room, pressing down on each of us with an almost physical force. Mr. Peton cleared his throat and began, the will of Evelyn Morgan, dated March 18, 2023. After careful legal preparation and with witnesses present, the following instructions were recorded as her final wishes. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The room waited, nerves stretched tight. Charles's hands balled into fists on the table, Linda's nails tapped a restless tattoo on her folder. Jessica finally put her phone down, her face drawn, while Emma stared at her lap, shoulders trembling. Mr. Peton continued. To my son Charles, I leave the collection of financial brochures from his office, which may serve as evidence for future investigations. Charles's face went purple. What is this? He spluttered, almost leaping from his chair. To my daughter Linda, Peton read on, the empty collection plate from First Methodist, along with my recommendation to Pastor Williams about the building fund. Linda's composure cracked. She can't do that. This is vindictive. Peton pressed on. To my granddaughter Jessica, all credit cards opened in my name, cancelled, with fraud alerts filed. To Emma, my genuine Hermes scarf, the one swapped for a fake. Jessica's jaw dropped. She fumbled with her phone, then began frantically texting, her fingers shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Emma let out a strangled sob, the sound echoing in the charged air. And to Bradley, Peton finished, my collection of addiction recovery pamphlets, in the hope that he finds them useful before the authorities do. Bradley stood abruptly, eyes flashing with something wild. This is a joke. This whole thing is a sick joke. I sat in stunned silence, hands trembling in my lap. It was as if all the secrets we'd tried to bury had been unearthed in a single, merciless sweep. I looked at Mr. Peton, almost afraid to breathe. He took a final breath. Everything else, real estate, investments, bank accounts, jewelry, and the contents of safety deposit boxes, are to be left in full to my granddaughter, Ava Morgan. A single, gasping breath sucked the air from the room. For a moment, I thought I might faint. Charles shot to his feet, knocking his chair back with a crash. This is outrageous. She manipulated Mother. She doesn't deserve any of this. Linda's voice rose, shrill and brittle. We'll fight this. Ava, you always were a little liar, a schemer. You got inside her head. I shook my head, barely able to form words. I didn't, this isn't, but my voice was lost under the growing storm. Jessica kept typing furiously on her phone. I'm texting my lawyer. This won't stand. Emma wept openly now, shoulders shaking, her face hidden in her hands. The noise in the room became a tide, rising until I thought it would drown me. Accusations, threats, the sound of paper tearing as Linda brandished the will, the scrape of Bradley's chair as he paced like a trapped animal. Mr. Peton remained a pillar of calm. The will is airtight, and all legal protocols were observed. Any attempt to contest will result in full disclosure of the evidence Mrs. Morgan referenced in her video. Charles sneered. You think you can threaten us? You think you can just walk in here and take everything? I stared at my hands, noticing how they shook, white-knuckled against my skirt. I tried to swallow the guilt and disbelief that threatened to choke me. It was then that Bradley lunged, half rising and reaching across the table toward me, his face twisted with rage and panic. Chairs screeched as everyone recoiled. Enough! Peton barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. He pressed a button on the phone by his elbow. Please send security in. Within seconds, 2 uniformed security guards appeared at the doorway, hands held calmly in front of them. Is there a problem? One asked. Just a heated discussion, Mr. Peton replied smoothly. Please remain nearby until we conclude. Bradley fell back into his seat, breathing hard, glaring at me like he'd never seen me before. For a moment, I felt detached from it all, as if I was watching from outside my own body. My heart thudded painfully. I thought of Evelyn's gentle hand on my shoulder, her belief that the truth mattered, no matter the consequences. The room gradually calmed, anger cooling into a cold, ugly silence. Papers littered the table, Emma's phone lay on the carpet where it had fallen, and Linda wept angry, silent tears. Peton gathered his papers. There is one more matter. Mrs. Morgan left a sealed letter to be delivered directly to Ava. He handed me a heavy envelope, the familiar script unmistakable. My fingers closed around it, still shaking. For the first time that morning, I realized tears were on my cheeks. As the family continued to mutter and accuse, I pressed the letter to my chest. The chill in the room was sharper now, but beneath it, something like relief stirred. Maybe what I'd wanted all along wasn't their approval or even their forgiveness, just the truth, finally spoken out loud. I stood, legs unsteady, the letter a lifeline in my grasp. Around me, the Morgan family unraveled, shouting, threatening, desperately clinging to the stories they'd built. Sometimes, you only find freedom by walking away from the ruins. As I left the room, the envelope heavy in my palm, I wondered what Grandma's final words would be, and if I was ready to hear them. I open Grandma's letter with hands that won't stop shaking. The world outside my windshield is falling into twilight, the last shreds of daylight fading behind the law office. My car is the only one left in the lot, engine ticking softly as it cools, the autumn wind rattling the leaves and the windows. For the first time all day, it's just me and Evelyn's handwriting, curling across the thick envelope in blue ink, steady even in her final days. Inside, the paper smells faintly of her rose hand cream. I unfold the first page, reading by the weak dome light overhead, and for a moment, the rest of the world falls away. There is only her voice, strong, gentle, stubborn as ever, coming to me across the great divide. My dearest Ava. If you're reading this, then you've already done the hardest part, you showed up. I always knew you would, even when the world gave you every reason to run. You got all the kindest genes in this family, and all the courage, too. My breath catches. I picture her as I last saw her, sitting on her porch swing, blanket over her knees, late afternoon light turning her silver hair to pale gold. She reached for my hand, squeezing it, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You worry too much, she'd teased, but her voice had been softer than usual. That was the last real conversation we'd had, before the Thanksgiving explosion, before the phone calls dried up. I know you're hurting, sweetheart. I know you feel alone. But you're not really. Family is what you make, not what you're given. You taught me that, just by being yourself. Don't let guilt take root in your heart. I watched you care for me out of love, not obligation. I saw the way you tried to bring everyone together, how you made tea and found the old photo albums and sat with me even when I fell asleep. I saw it all, and I never forgot. I blink hard, willing back the tears. My phone vibrates on the passenger seat, another text, no doubt from Linda or Charles. I don't look. Instead, I turn the page and keep reading. The money isn't punishment or revenge. It's my way of giving you something you can't find in a bank account, freedom. I know you'll want to share, to give your cousins another chance. That's why I love you. But, Ava, some people aren't ready to change. Every holiday, every Sunday dinner was a chance to do better, and most of them chose not to take it. That's not on you. As I read, I'm back in her kitchen, washing dishes, listening to her hum a tune from her girlhood. I remember bringing her cinnamon rolls from the bakery when she lost her appetite, the way she lit up at small kindnesses. The last time I saw her, I wrapped her in the soft blue shawl she always loved, and she whispered, "Promise me you'll live your life, not theirs. Use what I've given you to build something good. Start that nonprofit you dreamed about. Help people who need it, people who remind you of me. And if you ever feel guilty, remember, what I left you was mine, not theirs. They took enough already, in ways they'll never understand. Consider the slate clean." My phone buzzes again. I see the notifications pile up, threats, accusations, a few desperate pleas. You know this isn't over. We'll see you in court. How could you do this to your own family? My thumb hovers over the screen. One by one, I delete each message, watching them disappear into digital dust. A sob rises, sudden and unstoppable. I clutch the letter, pressing it to my face, breathing in the ghost of Evelyn's perfume. Grief and relief crash together, breaking over me in waves. I want to scream, to run, to crawl back into her arms and ask her what to do next. But I can't. All I have is her letter, her love woven into every word. The sky is nearly black now. I turn the last page. Don't let them dim your light, Ava. Sometimes, the black sheep is the only one who isn't a wolf. I hope you find peace in knowing you did the right thing, even when it hurt. I'm proud of you, always. All my love. Grandma. The finality of her words washes over me. For a long time I sit in the car, tears drying on my cheeks, the letter held to my heart. I think about everything that's been lost, and everything that might still be found. My phone is quiet at last. I tuck Evelyn's letter into my bag, feeling a small seed of hope settle somewhere deep inside the hurt. I start the car, headlights slicing through the darkness. Glancing back at the law office, I whisper, "What now?" But there's no answer except the wind and the promise of a new road. Coming back to the Morgan house felt like walking through someone else's life. The driveway was empty when I pulled in, but the ghosts of old family cars, Grandma's sensible sedan, Charles's gleaming truck, Emma's college beater, still lined up in my mind. The porch creaked under my weight, the same way it had when I was 12 and tried to sneak out past curfew. The front door key felt heavier than I remembered. Inside, the air was stale with the smell of old wood, mothballs, and a faint trace of Evelyn's lavender perfume. The house was silent, but not empty. Every shadow seemed to hold the memory of a voice, a laugh, an argument echoing down the hall. For a moment, I stood in the entryway, bags at my feet, unsure if I was intruding or coming home. Evelyn once told me, "The house holds memories, but it doesn't hold you prisoner." That was years ago, after my parents' divorce, when she let me stay the summer here. I'd clung to her words then. Now, they seemed both comforting and sharp-edged, like the afternoon light slanting through the stained glass on the stair landing. I wandered through the first floor slowly, touching the backs of armchairs, the mantel cluttered with faded family photos, the piano where Emma used to practice scales with dramatic sighs. My footsteps echoed off the high ceilings. In the kitchen, I set my grocery bag down, just basics: bread, cheese, apples, coffee. The ancient refrigerator rattled to life when I opened the door, startling me with its persistence. Room by room, I took inventory. The parlor, with its worn rugs and dusty doilies, looked like something from a sepia photograph. The dining room table was covered in a thin film of dust. Someone, Linda, I guessed, had taken all the silver. The old grandfather clock in the hallway was stuck at 11:42, a detail that felt significant in some way I couldn't quite name. Upstairs, the bedrooms were time capsules. My childhood room still held a faded quilt Evelyn made me, the pattern nearly worn through. In her room, sunlight spilled over the vanity, the mirror reflecting an image I barely recognized, older, tired, but standing. Evelyn's jewelry box sat open, empty but for a single hairpin and a photo of her as a young woman, smiling at a man I never met. I found boxes tucked in the closet, labeled in her careful handwriting, letters, photos, keepsakes. I carried them to the bed, sorting through decades of life. Wedding invitations, yellowed newspaper clippings, postcards from relatives now gone. There were letters from my father, apologizing for missing holidays, and notes from me, childish, earnest, full of hearts. In one envelope, I found a letter written but never sent. It was addressed to Linda, Evelyn's regret heavy in each line. I wish things could be different. I wish we'd learn to listen instead of judge. My throat tightened as I read, thinking of all the words we leave unsaid until it's too late. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, 3 missed calls from Charles, 2 angry voicemails from Linda, a barrage of texts from Emma. Each message was a variation on the same theme: threats, demands, and pleas. I put the phone on silent, determined to claim an hour of peace, but their voices still rang in my head. The house seemed to breathe around me, floorboards creaked as the wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. I felt Evelyn's presence in every corner, a comfort and a burden. The weight of inheritance pressed on my chest, not just money or property, but history, expectation, the sharp edges of love and disappointment. Rain began to spatter the glass, darkening the sky. I lit a candle on the kitchen table, then sat and let the silence settle. For the first time, loneliness swept through me so forcefully it left me breathless. I wanted to call someone, to fill the house with laughter and light, but all I heard were the echoes of old arguments and the ticking of the broken clock. I wandered into the study, running my fingers along the spines of Evelyn's books. There, behind a stack of ledgers, I found a photograph I'd never seen, Evelyn and me on the porch, both of us beaming, her arms slung around my shoulders. On the back, she'd written, "To the girl who taught me hope." Lightning flashed, and in the next instant, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, the only light the small candle flickering on the kitchen table. My heart raced as I groped for my phone, using its weak glow to find my way. The storm held outside, wind and rain battering the windows, branches scratching at the eaves. Panic rose in my chest, irrational, but real. Every childhood fear returned, the dark corners, the attic's hush, the secrets hidden in these walls. I thought of all the stories Grandma told me, about bravery, about standing your ground even when you're afraid. I tried to hold on to that, but my hands shook. I made my way back to the study, clutching my phone and the candle. My breath echoed, too loud in the silence. That's when I noticed Evelyn's desk, the drawer I'd always assumed was locked for good. In the stormy shadows, it seemed to call to me. My fingers found the small, brass handle. To my surprise, it was locked. I ran my thumb along the edges, remembering Evelyn's voice, "Not all secrets are meant to be kept forever." The house, with all its memories and burdens, was offering me one more mystery. The wind rattled the panes, thunder rolled across the hills. I leaned closer, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something like hope. Whatever waited in that locked drawer, it was a part of the story Evelyn meant me to find. Some secrets refuse to stay buried. I learned that lesson again in the hush after the storm, when the Morgan house still crackled with tension and rainwater tapped at the window panes. I woke just before dawn on the faded sofa in Evelyn's study, the candle long since burned out, wrapped in a scratchy afghan that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the ache in my shoulders and the memory of last night's panic swept over me, along with the image of Evelyn's desk, the locked drawer gleaming dully in the darkness. Evelyn's words echoed in my mind, "If you ever feel lost, look for the answers I left behind." I stretched, legs unsteady, and let my gaze roam the room. Outside, the storm had faded, leaving only the whisper of wind in the maple trees and a soft, watery gray light. Dust motes spun in the slanting beams filtering through the curtains. It felt as though the house itself was holding its breath. With nervous fingers, I searched the top drawer and the ceramic dish Evelyn always kept on the windowsill. There, nestled among faded coins and a lone earring, was a small brass key, cool and heavy in my palm. I let out a shaky laugh, half disbelief, half relief, then knelt before the locked drawer. The key turned with a reluctant click. Inside, everything was precisely arranged: files, a worn leather journal, envelopes sealed and unsealed, a thin sheaf of blueprints with Evelyn's tidy script in the margins. At the very back, under a pile of old photographs, I found a list of names and phone numbers, some familiar, most not. I pulled out the journal and set it on the desk, flipping through pages crowded with Evelyn's spiky handwriting. At first, it was little things, grocery lists, reminders to send birthday cards, notes about repairs. But deeper in, the tone shifted. Spoke with Mrs. Patterson, worried about Charles's latest pitch. Linda still won't admit to the missing funds. Bradley. I wish he'd let someone help. Each line was an act of care, each observation a gentle warning I'd failed to hear. Tucked among the pages were clippings from the local paper, a photo of Evelyn and her church group, an article about a food drive, even a snapshot of me as a teenager, shyly holding a certificate for volunteering. Underneath it all was something larger, a folded blueprint for the Evelyn Morgan Foundation, complete with a mission statement in her neat, looping hand, to give hope to those who have none, and to remind our family what kindness can build. I stared at it, my heart racing. Here, in blue ink and dog-eared corners, was the future Evelyn had envisioned, one she'd never seen realized. I could feel the weight of it settle on my shoulders, heavy and hopeful all at once. My phone vibrated, startling me from my reverie. It was a voice message from Mr. Peton. His tone was gentle, almost fatherly. "Take your time, Ava. The estate isn't going anywhere, and neither is my support. I know this is a lot. Call if you need anything." I sat back, letting the words sink in. The doubts I'd carried for weeks, months, maybe years, came tumbling out. Who was I to take on all this? Could I really turn Evelyn's dreams into something real? Or would I, like the rest of them, let old wounds fester and gifts go to waste? As the light crept across the desk, I opened the journal to a page marked with a pressed violet. Evelyn's handwriting was steadier here, more intimate. Some nights I can't sleep for worry that I've failed them all. Family should be a haven, but ours has become a battlefield. I don't blame Ava for speaking out. She's stronger than I ever was. I only hope she'll find peace in the ashes and build something beautiful with what I leave her. She sees what I see, that love can survive anything, even disappointment. The tears came without warning, hot and cleansing. I pressed my forehead to the desk, clutching the journal, and sobbed, not just for Evelyn, but for all the years spent trying to earn love that was never truly withheld, just buried under fear and pride. In her faith, I found a small seed of my own. By the time I straightened up, the sun was up. The house felt lighter, every corner touched with gold. I gathered the journal, the blueprint, and the list of names into a neat stack, feeling, if not whole, then at least anchored. In that moment, I resolved to finish what Evelyn had started. I would build her foundation, use the inheritance not as a shield but as a tool. For the first time, the future felt less like a threat and more like a promise. As I went to refill my coffee, I noticed something tucked under the front door. My heart sank before I even picked it up, a single sheet of paper, scrawled in angry block letters, "This isn't over. You'll pay for what you've done." No name, but I didn't need one. My hands trembled, but the old fear had lost its power. I folded the note and left it on the counter. I looked around at the house, the ghosts, the memories, the unburied secrets, and felt a quiet resolve settle in. Some burdens are too heavy to carry alone. But with Evelyn's words as a guide, I realized I didn't have to. Blood may be thicker than water, but boundaries are thicker than both. I repeated this to myself as I watched the sun spill through the Morgan house's lace curtains, my coffee cooling beside a neat stack of paperwork. The house felt different now, less haunted, more mine, though the air still vibrated with old tensions. My phone buzzed, a message from Charles, another from Linda. I almost ignored them, but the subject lines caught my eye, "We need to talk. You can't ignore us forever." I braced myself and listened to the voicemails, Linda's voice, syrupy and sharp, alternating between guilt and threat, Charles's, cool and clipped, all about lawyers and what mother would have wanted. Jessica's texts followed, full of legal jargon and blame. Each word was designed to push me back into the old Ava, the one who apologized first and doubted herself later. But Evelyn's words rang louder than any threat, "Don't let them dim your light." That morning, I returned Linda's call. I was careful to keep my voice steady, refusing to get drawn into an argument. "I've heard your concerns, but my answer is the same. I'm following Evelyn's wishes. I'm not open to further discussion." Linda's reply was a volley of accusations, How could I do this to family? Did I know what this would do to them, to their reputations? I let her words wash over me, refusing to rise to the bait. Charles showed up at the door that afternoon, suit pressed, face red with indignation. He pushed past me into the foyer, his presence too large for the room. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You know the rest of us won't let this go." I stood tall, gripping the doorframe. "If you or anyone else threatens me again, I'll call the police. This is your only warning." For a moment, he seemed stunned. In the old days, that would have been my cue to back down. Now, I simply held his gaze until he looked away, muttering about lawyers and family loyalty. After he left, my hands shook. But the fear that used to control me had dulled, replaced by something sturdier. I called Mr. Patton, relaying everything. His calm, measured response grounded me. "You're doing the right thing, Ava. The law is on your side, and so am I. Document everything. Don't hesitate to protect yourself." On his advice, I drove to the local police station. The waiting room was bright and busy, the buzz of radios and paperwork oddly reassuring. When I explained the situation to the desk officer, he brought me to Officer Ramirez, a woman about my age, with kind eyes and a steady handshake. "I see this more than you'd think," Officer Ramirez said as she took notes. "Family can be the hardest people to stand up to. But harassment is harassment." She explained my rights, the process for filing a report, and how to document further incidents. "If you need us, call. Even if it's just for peace of mind." Her support soothed the raw edges of my nerves. I left the station feeling lighter than I'd expected, with a folder of paperwork and a direct number for Officer Ramirez. For the first time in months, I felt protected, by law, by the memory of Evelyn's courage, by my own growing resolve. To clear my head, I stopped at the corner cafe where Evelyn and I used to split slices of lemon cake. The bell over the door chimed, and the familiar smell of coffee and sugar brought a wave of comfort. I ordered a latte and took a corner table by the window, tucking my folder beside me. I watched the rain beat on the glass, thinking about all that had changed. I could still hear the echo of family voices, demanding, pleading, angry. But beneath it was a new current, quiet, strong, unmoving. Boundaries. I realized then that I could love my family, and still refuse to let them hurt me. I took out Evelyn's journal, tracing her words with my finger. The foundation plan felt less intimidating here, with sunlight and clatter around me, the world going on outside. I began a list of what needed to be done, contacts to make, papers to file, conversations to have. My heart beat steadily. The dread had eased, replaced by purpose. It was late afternoon when Charles and Linda returned together, storming into the cafe as if they owned the place. They slid into the booth across from me without invitation. Linda's eyes glittered. "This can't go on, Ava. We're prepared to take you to court. It'll get ugly for you." Charles leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't want to make this a war." I closed the journal, folded my hands on the table, and met their gaze. "I'm not interested in war. I'm not interested in fighting with you at all. I am honoring Grandma's wishes. If you have an issue, take it up with my lawyer. And let me be clear, any further threats or harassment will be reported to the police. I'm done being intimidated." Linda sputtered, "We're family." "Then act like it," I said, quietly but firmly. "You don't have to like my choices, but you do have to respect my boundaries. This conversation is over." Charles stood abruptly, a bitter smirk twisting his mouth. "You'll regret this, Ava. You're all alone now." I let the words settle in the air, but they didn't sting the way they once might have. I watched them leave, the bell jangling in their wake. I looked down at the journal, Evelyn's words shining up at me. The hardest lines to draw are sometimes the most important. I took a sip of my latte, the taste unexpectedly sweet. I wasn't alone, not with Evelyn's love, not with my own strength finally taking root. Some lines, once drawn, don't need to be crossed again. There's freedom in finally saying enough. It doesn't always come with fireworks or raised voices. Sometimes it's a quiet, steadying breath, a single signature on a page, the weight of old chains falling away. I felt that freedom the morning I walked into Mr. Peton's office to sign the papers that would launch the Evelyn Morgan Foundation. The walls of the law office seemed less oppressive now, sunlight glinting off the brass fixtures, the chill of past confrontations replaced by a subtle anticipation. Mr. Peton greeted me warmly, offering coffee and a reassuring smile. I noticed how his handshake lingered, how the secretary at the front desk squeezed my shoulder. Small gestures, but meaningful. I was no longer just that troublesome granddaughter, I was someone forging a new path. As we reviewed the last stack of documents, my hands didn't tremble. Your grandmother would be proud, Mr. Peton said, sliding the final forms across the desk. This isn't an end, you know, it's a beginning. His words settled over me, soft but powerful. I signed my name with a feeling of calm purpose, imagining Evelyn's nod of approval. That afternoon, I drove to the community center for a meeting I'd arranged with Mrs. Patterson and several other locals who'd suffered from Charles's schemes. My stomach fluttered as I walked into the bright, echoing room. Mrs. Patterson met me at the door, her smile hesitant at first, then real. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, she admitted, her eyes misty. Neither was I confessed, and we both laughed, a gentle sound, easing the last of the tension. The others arrived, couples who'd lost savings, retirees who'd trusted too much, neighbors who had heard the rumors and never known what to believe. I stood before them, heart pounding, and told the truth. About Evelyn, about the inheritance, about my plans for restitution and for something better. I can't change what's happened, I said, but I can try to make things right. The foundation is for people like you, like us. We'll rebuild together. One by one, skepticism gave way to cautious hope. Questions came, and I answered them honestly. Officer Ramirez was there too, offering quiet support in the back row, her badge a silent reminder that the community had my back. That week, word spread through town. For the first time in months, I noticed smiles rather than suspicion at the grocery store, a neighbor waving from across the street. Strangers stopped me at the post office to thank me, or to share memories of Evelyn, her generosity, her tough love, her unwavering sense of justice. The Morgan name, once spoken with resentment, was beginning to sound different. Lighter. The highlight came at the community center's Saturday open house, a public event I'd helped organize, both to introduce the foundation and to thank those who believed in second chances. The room was crowded, filled with people I'd known all my life, and some I'd only just met. Sunlight streamed in, laughter bounced off the walls, the scent of coffee and baked goods mingled in the air. I stood at the front with Mrs. Patterson, hands clasped, a microphone trembling just slightly in my grip. Charles and Linda lurked at the back, whispering furiously, but their presence didn't rattle me as it once had. I spoke from the heart, this house, this town, this family, none of it is perfect. But we can choose what to do with what we're given. I hope the foundation becomes a place for hope, for help, for new beginnings. That's what Evelyn wanted, and that's what I want too. A ripple of applause filled the room, followed by a hush as Charles called out, "You think you can just erase the past with a speech and some money?" I held his gaze, steady. No. But I can do better with the future. Linda stepped forward, face pale, lips tight. "This isn't what Mother would have wanted," she said, voice trembling. Mrs. Patterson turned to her, calm but firm. "It's exactly what Evelyn would have wanted. You just never listened." The crowd murmured agreement, and I saw, for the first time, the power of community, how people can stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's when Emma appeared, stepping out from the side door, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. She crossed the room, all eyes on her, and paused in front of me. The silence was so complete, I heard my own heartbeat. "I'm sorry, Ava," she said, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "For what I did, for what we all did. You didn't deserve it." The room exhaled. I reached for her hand, and she took it, her grip warm and honest. The moment hung there, awkward, real, hopeful. In Emma's apology, I felt something shift in me and in the room, forgiveness, tentative and incomplete, but real. The past wasn't gone, but maybe it didn't have to rule us anymore. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and people lingered to talk and laugh, I looked around at the faces, strangers, friends, family, and realized I wasn't alone. Maybe I never had been, not really. Sometimes the family you choose finds you when you least expect it. I was rereading Evelyn's journal on a rainy Wednesday when that line from her appeared again, scrawled in the margins beneath a grocery list: "Plant new roots where kindness grows." For the first time, I felt I understood what she meant, not just with my mind, but in my bones. The Morgan house echoed with new sounds. Hammers, laughter, music from someone's radio drifting up the stairs. I'd hired local workers for repairs, some young, some older, all grateful for a steady job. The kitchen, once a stage for family squabbles, was now a hub of activity and warmth. We shared simple lunches around the scarred wooden table: sandwiches, soup, fresh apples, laughter. Sometimes Mrs. Patterson stopped by with her famous coffee cake, sometimes Officer Ramirez joined us for a cup of tea, her uniform jacket slung over the back of a chair, her smile softening the edges of my day. With every repaired window, every newly painted wall, the house grew less haunted and more alive. I found myself looking forward to the clang of tools, the banter over which paint color to choose for the hallway, even the inevitable discovery of ancient plumbing gone awry. When I invited everyone for dinner after work, the table filled up fast. No awkward silences, no barbed jokes, just the easy rhythm of friends becoming something more. I noticed small changes in myself. I checked my phone less, choosing instead to answer real knocks at the door. I received letters of thanks from people the foundation had helped: a mother able to pay rent, a retiree reunited with her grandchildren, a shy child whose drawing now hung on my fridge. Each note felt like a balm. One evening, a boy I'd helped slipped a bright red marble into my hand and whispered, "For good luck." I carried it in my pocket for weeks. The community center became my second home. Support groups met in the afternoons. In the evenings, the rooms hummed with new friendships and second chances. I led a budgeting workshop, watched Mrs. Patterson organize a clothing drive, cheered as Officer Ramirez coached a youth basketball team. People started bringing me little things: fresh rolls, a flower for my desk, handwritten cards. It surprised me how much these tokens meant. Maybe, I thought, this was what it felt like to belong. The biggest change, though, was in the foundation's new office, a sunny, modest space in the renovated house. I decorated with old family photos, Evelyn's smile presiding over all, letters from donors, and the blueprint of the foundation's mission, framed and hung by the door. When I worked late, Mrs. Patterson would stop by with a thermos of tea, and we'd talk about everything and nothing until the house felt warm even in the quiet hours. There were setbacks, too. Construction delays, paperwork snags, the occasional cold shoulder from those still loyal to Charles and Linda. But the sting was less sharp now. I learned to let go, of grudges, of the hope that my old family might suddenly become the people I needed them to be. I understood at last, healing isn't about erasing the past, but making space for something new to grow alongside it. The highlight of that first season was the Foundation's official opening. We held a potluck in the backyard, under strings of lights that turned the garden golden as the sun set. People came bearing dishes and stories. Mrs. Patterson made her legendary lasagna, Officer Ramirez brought tamales from her mother, kids darted through the grass, squealing and tumbling over each other. I stood with my chosen family and felt, for the first time in a long time, that I was home. As we gathered for a toast, Mrs. Patterson lifted her glass. To Evelyn, and to Ava. For believing in second chances. Glasses clinked. I looked around, my heart full to bursting. It wasn't just Evelyn's legacy I was honoring, it was my own new beginning, too. After the last guests had drifted home, I sat on the porch steps with a cup of tea, breathing in the night air. The house behind me glowed with lamplight and laughter. I thought of all the roots growing here now, weaving a new kind of family. That's when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated, but something in me said to answer. Charles's voice came through, low and rough. Ava. I need to talk to you. Please. Just once. The words hung between us, uncertain, full of history. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, I felt strong enough to face it. As I sit by the window, sunlight warming my hands, I realize how much love can grow when we choose kindness over old grudges. Life has taught me that family isn't just about blood, but about those who show up and stand by you, even when it's hard. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly move forward, and in doing so, we give ourselves the freedom to find peace. If this story has touched your heart, I hope it reminds you of the strength found in forgiveness and the quiet power of compassion. Please feel free to share your own thoughts or stories about family and hope. I'd love to hear from you.